Hey everybody, watch this review here with a video response to Boxin Typex / Anthony James's top 10 worst Marvel DC super comic book movies. Every time I try to do this it runs crazy long, so I'm just gonna try to run through it as quickly as possible and just be as sparse with details. But I mean, first of all, we have two real runners up. We have Howard the Duck, which I didn't feel like putting on this just because you can't expect as much. And I mean, a lot of these other movies, they should have known better, they should have done better. But it was completely awful. The animatronics looked terrible. Or I don't know if they used puppets or animatronics, but the characters all looked awful, the story was terrible, and so forth. And X-Men Origins Wolverine, which I was completely let down by. I mean, Wolverine has a dark and sordid history, and a violent history too, when yet again Wolverine's played like a pansy. I mean, the original Wolverine, the one that we saw in X-Men 1, was pretty much of a tough guy. That's kind of Wolverine that I was expecting to see. But they brought back the wimpier one, who's a complete pacifist in this film, and so forth. And of course, it's not exactly true to the original story either, I guess. But, whatever. Also, Ryan Reynolds, completely awful choice for Deadpool. The guy's only real claim to fame is being married to Scarlett Johansson. Which is good for him. Good for him, though. That's gonna prop up his career for decades forward. But on to the actual list. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The only thing extraordinary about this movie is the fact that they got Connery and a whole bunch of other big names that star in it. This movie is pretty horrendous. So there's some awful plot twists, but I think a lot of it ties back to the original story. And of course, you know, I didn't really have much going for it. Punisher 2004. I mean, this was actually worse than the 80s version, or 80s or 90s direct to VHS, which didn't even have the Punisher logo on the Punisher, but this version didn't have any violence. I mean, there's next to no killing. The only real violent scenes are when Frank Castle's family's getting killed in the beginning of the movie. But, yeah, completely awful film. I mean, instead of just going in there and killing these mobsters, he ends up befriending this house full of misfits, and then he ends up going on this huge convoluted plot where he kind of well, it involves like him moving fire hydrants and doing all sorts of other crap. It was just for crying out loud. I mean, it was a horrendous movie. The original, even the old one, was much better, but I digress. X-Men 3. I wasn't thrilled by the other X-Men movies, especially not the Magneto's plot in the first film. A lot of the stuff in the second film, like the dialogue, really turned me off. The second film had a great plot. But, I mean, they kill Cyclops off 5 minutes into the movie, which honestly was a mercy killing, because if I was the actor, I wouldn't want to have to sit through the rest of that piece of crap. Because otherwise I'd end up like George Clooney, and I'd probably be giving out refunds to everybody I met. So, Hulk, the Ang Lee version. There are all the many horrendous things wrong with this film. First and foremost is the cinematography. I believe he also did Pearl Harbor offhand. Like, I'm not 100% sure, but it's the same choppy camera work where the action jumps nonstop. In addition to that, if that wasn't bad enough, they added some stylized comic book things where you have action going on in several panels, and you can't keep up with it. Or if you can keep up with it, it just diminishes the value, the overall effect. Number 6, Elektra. One of the biggest problems with the Daredevil movie was the casting of Ben Affleck as Daredevil, Jennifer Garner as Elektra. Again, that didn't perform terribly well at box office, but they decided to do a spin-off. I don't know why. Although Ben Affleck wasn't like a great casting choice, you know, Jennifer Garner is outright terrible. We have this super sexy ninja, and she's being played by like a girl next door character. I mean, honestly, Jennifer Garner really reminds me of like sort of babysitter that you might have had as a kid, where, you know, she actually comes over and she studies instead of inviting the boyfriend over. So, completely terrible choice. Angelina Jolie, where were you? Number 5, Batman and Robin. Now, as mentioned before, George Clooney allegedly apologized for making this movie and has offered refunds for anybody who asks. If you do see George Clooney, don't ask for an autograph, ask for your $8 back. Now, among all the horrendous things, you have the casting of Clooney and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger being a very, very muscular Mr. Freeze. And of course, Bane was a little bit off too. I mean, Uma Thurman I could have gotten behind, but I mean, the movie in general is more of a throwback towards the campy 60s film. But I mean, Schumacher showed us that he had a talent for taking a massive film franchise and $100 million budget and tanking it into a $10 to $20 million movie. So it basically was the death knell in the franchise and led to the reboot. Otherwise, Scarecrow supposedly would have been the next villain, plus it delayed the Catwoman coming out yet again. Which brings us to number 4, Catwoman. Now, originally, Michelle Pfeiffer was going to be Catwoman, and it was going to be a spin-off almost immediately after Batman Returns. Now, if Tim Burton had directed that probably would have been a pretty decent movie, and I would have loved it, because Michelle Pfeiffer made a completely awesome Catwoman. Batman Returns being one of my favorite comic book movies. Now, among the many horrendous problems with this is the Catwoman in the movie has very little to nothing to do with any incarnation of Catwoman in any comic ever. She gets her powers from a chemical spill, and she ends up fighting a woman whose cosmetics have turned her skin hard as stone. I'm not going to go into any further than this. I believe that sufficiently summarizes the stupidity. Superman 3, I regard this as being worse than Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. Some people may argue it differently, but it's about Richard Pryor's character, Gus Somethingman, who's this idiot savant computer hacker, comes up with this same scheme that they rehashed later in Hackers. Then Office Space stole that storyline from Hackers, but basically it's a worm that takes a little bit off transactions. Then you have this massive pile of profit, but the CEO, a rich guy, ends up finding out. He blackmails him so he could to do some evil shit like changing the weather to affect the commodities market, because the rich guy wants to be richer, which was exactly the same plot in the first Superman film. And the only reason that Superman's being targeted is because Superman's interfering with this crap. But yeah, other than that, they completely overestimate technology. I mean, computers are able to scan for kryptonite in space somehow. I don't know how they do this. I don't remember. But, I mean, no matter how they do it, it's not going to be remotely plausible. Then replicate it on Earth. And then this kryptonite is imperfect. So it basically works as gold kryptonite, and Superman ends up going on a drinking binge, and then he ends up somehow splitting in half and fighting and killing himself. Yeah, I kid you not. I don't remember if it was a dream sequence. I don't know if it's metaphorical. I don't care. You don't do that. Spider-Man 3. I don't even think I'm going to really talk about this because, I mean, basically, casting was awful. And the stupid humor that was present in the first films is back with a vengeance. I don't know, but I mean, the Venom, actually, I'm just going to talk about, because how do you pick the one guy shorter than Tobey Maguire to play a guy, Eddie Brock, who's always physically a hell of a lot bigger than Peter Parker? I mean, I can't believe that they were able to find one person in Hollywood shorter than Tobey Maguire, but wow, we have it. It's that whiny kid from that 70s show. Wow. Yeah, but everybody knows why it's awful. I have to hop on the last one because this one's going to take up a significant amount of time. Some people might know what this is. Some people may not have guessed it, but if there's a God, he's not a merciful God. And he definitely has a sick sense of humor. Ghost Rider is by far the most awful movie ever made. Or at least in comic book movies. And there actually have been worse movies, but I mean, why would you pick Nicolas Cage, who hasn't had a career in maybe 10, 15 years, has been giving really crappy, hollow performances, to play a total badass character like Ghost Rider? I don't know. But, here we are. In addition to that, you have all these demonic villains who are all human-like, And turn to element creatures, we have Mephisto, who never dons his comic book look. We have Blackheart, who's human until the very end where he gets all these souls and he has a demonic form, but it's not even really demonic form. It doesn't even resemble his comic book version. I mean, this movie should never have been made. Every time I think about this film, I throw up a little inside. I mean, I feel violently ill. I mean, literally. By the way, little known fact, the Geneva Convention actually prevents detainees from having to watch this movie because it is considered an act of torture. I kid you not, you can probably look it up somewhere. I guarantee you it will be there. But yeah, these are the movies I feel to be the 10 worst. I'm sorry I couldn't really go into as much depth in some of them as others, but some of the placement is kind of iffy and debatable. Batman Robin's actually a pretty entertaining film if you can get past all the stupidity, but Ghost Rider's horrendous no matter how you look at it. Until next time.